The coffee cup on the teacher's desk was still steaming when Evelyn Harper vanished from Deer Park, a suburb of Houston, Texas. It was a June evening in 1972, the heat and the smell of oil from Beck Refinery clinging to the air like thick fog. At 9:15 p.m., the last colleague to leave the school said the 26-year-old teacher smiled, waved goodbye, and mentioned she'd head home early to prepare for the next morning's class. A nearby resident saw her driving her yellow Ford Pinto, turning onto an industrial road leading east out of town. The taillights of the small car disappeared around a bend, blending into the blazing orange glow of the refinery's smokestacks. What happened in the hours that followed would leave Houston searching for answers for 35 years. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Houston, June 1972. The heat enveloped the city from morning till late at night, thick with the smell of gasoline and the humid breath of Buffalo Bayou. The air was so heavy it seemed to stick to the skin, a mix of metal, earth, and industry blending into an indescribable concoction. At night, the dim yellow streetlights reflected on the water, and in the distance, the sound of ship horns and the hum of refinery engines pulsed like a heavy, unending heartbeat. Against this weary backdrop, Evelyn Harper's yellow Ford Pinto quietly left the Deer Park School parking lot, where she had just finished the final parent-teacher meeting of the school year. Evelyn, 26, was an elementary school teacher, beloved by students and described by colleagues as gentle as morning sunlight. That evening, she carried a small purse with a few papers and a gradebook, said a quick goodbye to the assistant principal, and walked to her car. No one noticed anything unusual. A parent later said she saw Evelyn pause at the school gate, seemingly searching for something in her bag, before getting into her car, starting it, and driving toward the industrial area to the east. The car's lights faded into the distance, blurring among the flickering refinery glow and the empty road. After that turn, no one saw her again. The next morning, Evelyn's chair in the teacher's lounge remained empty. On her desk lay an unfinished lesson plan, a ballpoint pen tilted to one side, and an enamel mug with dried coffee stains. The clock struck 8, but her classroom stood silent, with no one to teach. The principal tried calling her, the phone ringing endlessly to no avail. By noon, Evelyn's mother, Margaret Harper, visited her daughter's apartment on West 13th Street, a small, tidy, quiet place. The front door was locked, the mailbox stuffed with uncollected letters. Neighbors said they hadn't seen Evelyn's car that night. Using a spare key, Margaret entered and found everything intact. The bed neatly made, the radio on standby, a family photo on the shelf. Only one thing was missing. Evelyn, that afternoon, Margaret called everywhere, the school, friends, the church, hospitals. No one knew where her daughter was. As the sun set, light drained from the low rooftops of Deer Park, leaving a pale glow on the smoky gray sky. In the small kitchen, the ceiling fan spun slowly, its shadow rippling across the walls. Margaret sat in silence, staring at the phone, as if it could answer the deafening quiet of the night. Her trembling hand rested on the receiver, listening to the click of each dialed number. When someone finally picked up, she spoke slowly, almost whispering, "My daughter didn't come home." That sentence closed a long night and opened a chain of days Deer Park would never forget. The next morning, when Evelyn Harper's missing person report reached the Harris County Sheriff's Office, patrol teams were immediately dispatched to Deer Park. The Texas sun, barely risen, already baked the pavement, light glinting off oil-slicked roads in deceptive shimmers. Officers split up to cover the routes Evelyn might have taken from the school, through residential areas, and into the industrial zone to the east. They stopped at every gas station and roadside diner, asking if anyone had seen a young woman driving a yellow Ford Pinto the previous night. Most shook their heads. A few recalled seeing a yellow car pass by, but couldn't pinpoint the time. By noon, police brought out detailed maps, marking every possible direction, the narrow road along Buffalo Bayou, the empty lot behind Beck Refinery, the muddy banks of the channel, and the route to Highway 225. A search team was formed, equipped with dogs and small boats. Groups waited along the channel's edge, combing through grass and scanning wet soil, where the river left faint tire tracks. They hoped to find something, a tire mark, a scrap of fabric, or even a footprint. Occasionally, an officer paused, examining the ground with a magnifying glass. All they found were animal tracks or truck tire marks. The air thickened with the smell of oil and rotting leaves. Seabirds from Galveston Bay circled overhead, their hoarse cries cutting through the wind. In the distance, the steady hum of Beck Refinery's pumps droned like an artificial breath blanketing the area. Locals gathered to watch, whispering theories, each with their own opinion. A middle-aged mechanic told police, "Last night, I saw a yellow car stop near the Beck Refinery gate. Couldn't see who was inside, but the lights were on, then it was gone." The police noted it, marking the area around the refinery's east gate, a dirt road leading to the riverbank. That afternoon, Detective Vernon Miles was assigned to lead the case. With over a decade of experience, he had worked on several missing persons cases in the area. At the scene, Miles stood watching the slow, murky flow of the river. He muttered softly, "If she went in there, there'd be nothing left." But he knew that was unlikely. There was no evidence of a crash, no skid marks on the road. He ordered the search expanded toward the industrial zone. Police jeeps crawled through warehouses and massive oil tanks, tires crunching over dry, sandy soil. Every sound was swallowed by the refinery's compressors. Another team walked along the iron fence surrounding Beck Refinery, searching for clues. On the damp ground from the previous night's rain, they found a faint tire track, smaller than a truck's, but larger than a typical car's. No one could confirm if it was from a Ford Pinto. Miles ordered it photographed and marked, then watched in silence. The wind carried heat and a chemical burn that stung the throat. Something felt off, nagging at him. By late afternoon, the search paused as temperatures soared past 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Officers returned to the temporary base, reporting no clear signs of foul play. Miles didn't buy it. He opened the map, pointing to the area between the industrial road and the channel where the tire track appeared. "Here," he said, "she might have stopped, or someone made her stop." As night fell, the refinery's lights blazed white, reflecting on the river like an unblinking gaze. Meanwhile, in the Harpers' small home, Margaret sat motionless by the phone, the clocks ticking echoing through the living room. Outside, neighbors who'd heard the news stopped by with coffee, pastries, and quiet condolences, but none dared voice the fear spreading in their hearts. The young teacher, beloved by the community, might have left this world somewhere in this city of droning machines and oil-scented air. As the second night passed without news, police expanded the search south of Beck Refinery. The team began at dawn, moving through the eastern industrial zone, where massive tanks and pipelines radiated oppressive heat. As they crossed a narrow dirt road toward the river's edge, a young officer, Bill Carver, spotted something bright glinting in the sunlight among tall grass. He approached and called out. Hidden behind low trees, in a damp patch of land, was a yellow Ford Pinto, Evelyn Harper's car. It sat still, showing no signs of a crash. The driver's door was ajar, half-locked, with the key still in the ignition. Mud caked the front tires, suggesting it had been there for at least 2 nights. Police cordoned off the scene. No one spoke loudly. Only the hum of flies around puddles and the scratch of pencils in notebooks broke the silence. As the car was covered and sealed, the search team's mood grew heavy. Everyone understood that moment shifted the case from a missing person to a potential crime. The next morning, Detective Vernon Miles arrived at the scene as the sun rose over Beck Refinery's tanks. He had seen hundreds of accidents and dozens of crime scenes, but something about this one made him linger. Evelyn's yellow Ford Pinto sat in the muddy patch, caked with dried mud, looking like an abandoned object in an industrial wasteland. Police had strung yellow tape around it, and technicians were snapping photos, the metallic clicks of their equipment echoing. Miles approached slowly, opening his notebook. He leaned in, inspecting the driver's compartment. "Passenger seat pushed back," he wrote. "Steering wheel off angle. The gear was in neutral, suggesting no handbrake. Under the seat, the floor was dusted with dark mud, its oily smell making him grimace. He touched it with a gloved hand, sticky, thick, not typical road mud. On the seat, a faint imprint suggested someone had sat there briefly and left in a hurry. Miles looked at the windshield. 2 small handprints marked the driver's side corner, blurred by humidity. He ordered them lifted, then stepped outside, circling the car. The ground to the left bore a wider tire track, stretching nearly 2 meters toward Beck Refinery. The track was deep, likely from a small truck. "Preserve this area, no one walks through," he told a nearby officer. From there, the rusted metal fence of the refinery gleamed in the sunlight. The wind carried a sharp chemical smell, familiar from paint and industrial solvents, burning the throat. Miles noted, air at the scene smells of chemicals, unfamiliar tire track toward Beck Refinery. He walked the dirt path, eyes scanning every inch. There were fresh shoe prints, men's dress shoes, large, with clear heel marks. A technician called out, "Sir, found a gray fiber in the door gap." Miles took the sealed bag, a short, dark, synthetic wool fiber, oil-stained at the tip. "Test the oil on the mud under the car, and this fiber. Send it to the lab now," he ordered. The technician nodded and left. In the noon light, everything was starkly vivid. The dark soil, the metallic glint of the refinery, the white smoke curling skyward. It all seemed normal for the area, but to Miles, it felt like a thick mask, hiding something deeper. He looked at the road, then at the fence, where low bushes trembled in the wind. A few hundred meters away was Buffalo Bayou's bank. Hiding something there would be easy. But there were no drag marks, no disturbed soil. He lit a cigarette, took a drag, then stubbed it out as a young officer approached with another bag. "Hair, possibly the victim's." Miles nodded. "Treat everything here as a clue." At the nearby temporary headquarters, technicians began quick analyses. Mud and oil samples were examined under microscopes and tested with portable spectrometers. Preliminary results printed in black and white, the oil, mixed with solvent, matched Beck Refinery's products from years prior. A young technician pointed to a graph. "The benzene ratio in this sample is nearly identical to what the refinery produced a few years ago." Miles said nothing, staring through the glass at the massive tanks reflecting sunlight. He knew this wasn't enough to accuse anyone, but it pointed to a clearer path than anything before. Returning to the scene, the roadside grass had dried, revealing a muddy streak, as if a vehicle had turned in place. Miles followed it to the steel fence, where a locked side gate to Beck Refinery stood. A faded "authorized personnel only" sign swayed in the wind, its silver paint peeling. The words blurred with age, but to Miles, they carried a sense of prohibition. He paused for a long moment, then said softly, "We'll be back here." As he left, the refinery's pumps droned, drowning out all else. On the ground, the yellow tape fluttered, glinting sharply. Behind, Buffalo Bayou flowed quietly, carrying thin oil slicks, like fading memories slipping beyond human reach. That afternoon, as the oil analysis report arrived at the office, Detective Vernon Miles returned to a small gas station a few blocks from Deer Park School, where Evelyn was last seen. The night shift worker, a man named Howard King, about 40, remembered clearly. He said Evelyn stopped to buy coffee and top off her gas before heading home. While paying, a man approached her, wearing a gray-green coverall with Beck Refinery's logo on the chest. Howard recalled, "She seemed a bit tense. He said something, she nodded, and left. I couldn't hear, just saw him watching," as her car drove off. Miles wrote every word, his pen deliberate and slow. When asked about the man's appearance, Howard said, "Graying hair, tall, thin, oil stains on his collar." The description immediately brought to mind a name from the refinery's internal records, Thomas Beck, a 43-year-old night shift supervisor, commended for handling a pipeline issue in 1970. He had access to all areas of Beck Refinery, including the eastern storage zone where Evelyn's car was found. Miles sent a verification request. Hours later, Beck's HR department confirmed Thomas Beck, shift supervisor, worked the night of June 16, left the refinery at 11 p.m., went home. When summoned for questioning, Beck arrived promptly, neat, hair combed back, shoes polished. His voice was low, steady, and slightly hoarse, like a longtime smoker's. In the interview room, Miles placed Evelyn's photo on the table. "Do you know this woman?" Beck glanced briefly, nodding slightly. "I know her. She teaches at my daughter's school. I've seen her at school events." "Did you see her on the night of June 16th? "Yes, I saw her at the gas station near the school. We just said hello, nothing else. She seemed in a hurry." Beck's tone was as if rehearsed, utterly calm. Miles sat across, staring silently. In the room's white light, Beck's face showed no emotion. His pupils narrowed, hands lightly clasped on the table. He didn't purse his lips, didn't blink excessively, didn't defend. A man used to controlling reactions. After a few more questions, Miles ended the session. But the slippery feel of deception lingered. As Beck left, he added, "I know everyone's worried, but she's a good person. I'm sure no one would hurt her." His voice sounded like a rehearsed monologue. That night, Miles and two officers visited Beck Refinery. Under high-pressure lamps, metal pipelines crisscrossed, reflecting the orange flare of exhaust flames. A security guard led them to the internal parking lot. In a corner sat Beck's small truck, its nameplate dulled by dust. Miles requested a check. The truck bed was unnaturally clean. The metal floor gleamed, smelling of solvent and gasoline. Shining a flashlight, he saw fresh scratches on the undercoat and a still wet patch, as if cleaned that night. When asked, the guard said, "This morning, Mr. Beck washed the truck himself, said he spilled oil in the warehouse and needed to clean it." Miles looked around, silent. Outside, heat from the smokestacks warped the air, light trembling on the concrete. He ordered photos and samples of the solvent and paint from the truck bed. A technician nodded, scraping the metal lightly. Later, Miles stood at the refinery gate, looking toward the road where Evelyn's Pinto was found. Just a few hundred meters separated the 2 points. A woman vanished, and a man seemed to know too much about what happened. That night, in his report to command, Miles wrote briefly, "Gas station witness confirms Harper spoke with a Beck Refinery employee. Subject, Thomas Beck, night shift supervisor. Subject's personal truck shows signs of recent cleaning with industrial solvent. Insufficient evidence to charge, but potential involvement." At the bottom, in smaller handwriting, he added, "Possible involvement. No evidence." He closed the notebook, stubbed out his cigarette, and looked out the window. Beyond, Beck Refinery's lights burned bright, casting an orange glow on the night sky, like an unhealing burn. 2 days after questioning Thomas Beck, the search expanded to a narrow strip of land, running parallel to the refinery's eastern fence. It was a buffer zone between the industrial area and the channel, rarely visited, with waist-high grass, scattered paint cans, oil debris, and rotted wood. In the early sunlight, the air hung heavy with a sharp, metallic chemical smell. Detective Vernon Miles joined the technical team, walking slowly, eyes scanning every inch. He believed if anything was overlooked, it would be within the short distance between the car's location and Beck Refinery's fence. Near a corner of the fence, a young officer crouched, calling softly, "Sir Miles, something here." In the tangled grass, a white handkerchief, blackened with oil, lay pressed under thin soil. When lifted, they saw embroidered initials in the corner, EH faded, but legible. Miles gloved up, examining it closely. The fabric was soft, finely woven cotton, with hand-stitched edges, the kind of handkerchief women used, matching Margaret Harper's description. He sniffed it, a heavy smell of crude oil, mixed with industrial solvent. As the technician sealed it in a bag, Miles said quietly, "Send it straight to the lab. Compare the cotton to samples from Harper's car." The ground there was hardened, with scattered old tire tracks. Some were deeper, likely from a light truck. Miles ordered photos and measurements. He traced the tracks, but they faded after a few meters, obscured by dry soil and grass. On the rusted metal fence, a scratched paint mark suggested something hard had struck it. These were small pieces, not enough for a clear picture, but each one drew Miles' gaze back to Beck Refinery. As he prepared to request a search warrant, the precinct captain, a man named Colby, approached, voice low. "Vernon, you really want to go that far?" Miles looked up, eyes narrowing. "We have evidence, her belongings right by their fence." Colby sighed, pulling him aside from the technicians. "Listen, Beck Refinery isn't just a company. They fund this entire area, our patrol cars, even our pension fund. You get me? I get it. But that doesn't change the fact someone's missing." "True, but a warrant for Beck? You're poking a hornet's nest." Colby's voice dropped. "Be careful." Miles stayed silent, looking at the warrant request he'd drafted. He knew Colby wasn't threatening, just warning. In 1972 Houston, oil companies were bigger than local government. A baseless search could get him suspended in a day. Still, that night, he submitted the warrant request to the Harris County DA's office. 2 days later, it was returned. The typed response was cold. "Insufficient probable cause. Denied." The reason? No direct evidence placing the victim or suspect inside Beck Refinery at the time of disappearance. Miles read the line repeatedly, feeling a door slam shut. Back at the office, an unmarked envelope waited on his desk. Inside was a clipped article about Beck Refinery, headlined "Refinery Maintains Record Output, Boosting Harris County Economy." No signature was needed. The message was clear. Stop. Meanwhile, lab results confirmed the handkerchief's cotton matched the car's seat lining, and the oil on it was identical to the car's floor sample. A light crude used only in Beck's refining process. Miles read the report, a knot in his throat. He personally delivered the sealed bag to evidence storage, signed it in, and sat alone in the hallway for a long time. Outside, dusk painted Buffalo Bayou red, refinery smoke curling in the orange light. A young officer passed, whispering, "You're doing the right thing, but they won't let you go far. You're touching Beck. Be careful." Miles didn't reply. He looked out the window, where the refinery's lights flickered on, white and cold like countless eyes. In the fading light, night shift workers streamed to the gate, their gray uniforms moving like a metallic mass. He thought of Evelyn Harper, the handkerchief by the fence, and wondered what happened on either side of that iron grid. That night, at home, he reopened the case file, placing the handkerchief's photo at the top. The embroidered EH was faint but persistent, refusing to be forgotten. In his notebook, he wrote the day's final line: "Investigation direction, Beck Refinery on hold. Political pressure." He closed the book, snuffed out his cigarette, and was left with the smell of smoke, oil, and a smoldering frustration in the silent room. The next morning, Vernon Miles sat in his small office at the end of the hallway, a Houston map spread across his desk. He no longer had the authority to cross Beck Refinery's fence, but the questions refused to stop. Cold fluorescent light fell on hand-drawn pencil lines, Evelyn Harper's usual route, Deer Park Elementary, the gas station where she stopped, and the dirt road leading to where her Ford Pinto was found. He circled each point in red, connecting them with dashed lines, trying to reconstruct her final journey. The drive from school to home took less than 15 minutes, yet in that short distance, a woman vanished without a trace. He opened his notebook, rereading the gas station attendant's statement and the worker who saw a yellow car near the refinery gate. Everything pointed to one area, the strip of land between the industrial road and Beck Refinery's fence. Miles pinned a marker on the map at the narrow road to the refinery's side gate. It felt like the pieces were converging, but he lacked the critical element, evidence that Evelyn had been there. He called Beck Refinery, requesting the logbook for the night of June 16th. After several transfers, The security manager agreed to provide a photocopy. Miles arrived at the refinery in the sweltering afternoon, the oil smell so thick it stung his face. The security office was in a red brick building by the main gate, walls lined with rule boards and photos of workers awarded Safety Employee of the Month. The head guard, an old man named Rollins, hesitantly handed over a black leather logbook. Neat handwritten entries recorded the times of vehicles entering and exiting. Everything seemed normal until the page for June 16th. The last entry for the night shift was heavily scratched out with blue ink, bleeding onto the next page. Beneath the scratches, faint words remained. Truck 14, East Lot, 10:02 p.m. Miles looked up. What's truck 14? Rollins hesitated. A small maintenance truck, but it hasn't been used in a while. Who drove it that night? I don't recall. Could have been Mr. Beck or someone on his team. Rollins' voice trailed off. He avoided Miles's gaze, hands gripping the desk's edge. Miles flipped to the next day's page. The log returned to normal, with no mention of truck 14. He rubbed a pencil lightly over the scratched-out section, the blue ink smudging to reveal clearer text. Truck 14, East Lot, out, 10:02 p.m. No return. What does no return mean? Miles asked. Rollins swallowed, answering softly. They probably forgot to log it. Who's they? The guard didn't respond, only shook his head. It was a long time ago. I don't remember. Miles closed the book and stood. In the small room, the air conditioner's chill couldn't mask the lingering oil smell. Outside the window, the iron fence and storage yard stretched to the horizon, white tankers lined up like silent sentinels guarding secrets. He thanked Rollins and left. Passing through the hallway, a man in gray coveralls emerged from a side room, whispering, "Detective Miles, a word of advice. If you want to stay in investigations, don't dig too deep. Beck has eyes everywhere." Back at the office, Miles reopened the case file. He typed a timeline summary. 9 p.m. Evelyn leaves Deer Park Elementary, approximately 9:20 p.m. Stops at gas station near school, meets Thomas Beck. After drives toward Beck Refinery, through industrial area. 9:30, 9:45 p.m. Loses contact, no longer seen. 10:02 p.m. Truck 14 leaves Beck Refinery, via East Gate. No return logged. The timestamps lined up on paper, neat and cold. Each line felt like a slow knife tapping in his mind. He leaned back, staring at Evelyn's photo pinned to the board, young, bright-eyed, hair neatly combed, a gentle smile. Below it, the rote sketch with red markings. Every path led back to one place, Beck Refinery. The next day, Miles called Rollins again. The tired voice on the line said, "I told you, I don't remember. Stop calling." When pressed, the phone clicked off. He tried contacting former night shift workers from that year, but most had moved away or went silent upon hearing he was asking about Beck. One said curtly, "I don't want to be involved. You know how it is. Let old refinery business stay buried." 3 weeks passed with no new details. The oil sample, fiber, handkerchief, all hints not enough for court. The DA's office denied further investigation funding. The press stopped reporting. Evelyn Harper's disappearance, once a local uproar, dwindled to a few lines on the back page of the local section. In the quiet office, Miles sat alone, the ceiling fan humming steadily. He looked at the map, the red dots unmoving, cold. Amid the pencil lines and pins, the void where Evelyn vanished remained as empty as the first night at the scene. He folded the map, filed it away, and stood. Outside, dusk settled, Beck Refinery's smoke rising in pale white streaks, curling in the wind like smudged erasures across the sky. In his notebook, he wrote the day's final entry. No witnesses, no evidence. Investigation halted. Below, in smaller print, almost for himself, he added, nothing left to pursue. 6 months after Evelyn Harper vanished, winter hit Houston, but the cold couldn't temper the relentless heat from the oil refineries, spewing white smoke day and night. At the Harris County Sheriff's Office, Case 720616E, was officially moved from active investigation to closed. No body, no witnesses, no new evidence. Every report reached the same conclusion: no signs of foul play. The typed line on the case file's cover read, "Voluntary missing. No foul play indicated." That dry sentence made Vernon Miles stare at the papers for a long time. He remembered every detail: the mud-caked yellow Ford Pinto, the embroidered handkerchief by the fence, the scratched-out log entry. It was all there, but in the system, it lacked the weight to bring anyone to light. When he asked his superior, the response was, "No body, no crime." Days later, the order to halt the investigation came. Evidence was sealed and stored in the basement, with hundreds of other missing persons cases. Evelyn Harper's name faded from morning briefings. Miles sat alone in his office. Outside, rain tapped the window frame. He opened a drawer, pulling out a black leather notebook, his personal case diary, kept since day one. In small, slow handwriting, he wrote, "Someone wiped the truth clean." He underlined, "wiped clean" twice, then closed the book, the dry rustle of pages echoing. He knew he was recording something that might never reach a courtroom, but it was the piece of truth he still held. In the cramped room, the desk lamp cast light on stacked case files. He pulled another, comparing missing persons cases around the industrial area over the past decade. Several young women, a few seasonal workers, all ended the same: no foul play. The phrase repeated like a mechanical stamp. He understood that sometimes justice didn't die in the dark, but in the exhaustion and fear of those holding the pen. As the precinct clock struck 8, Miles stood and opened the window. The rain had stopped, leaving mist rising from the pavement, reflecting faint yellow streetlights. In the distance, Beck Refinery's lights burned like endless embers. He wondered how many secrets were buried in those steel pipes and storage tanks with the crude oil. Before leaving, he carefully organized Evelyn Harper's file. He made a copy, placed it in a manila envelope, and wrote by hand, "Keep, personal." He locked it in the bottom desk drawer. The case was closed, but in his mind, it was an unfinished song. The melody cut off mid-note, the final chord left hanging. As he turned off the light, the room sank into the hallway's dim glow. He paused at the threshold, glancing back at the desk where the file rested. In the silence, he imagined the sound of a pencil scratching paper, a phantom echo of someone unable to let go. Then, he stepped outside. That night, wind from the bay swept into the city, carrying oil and moisture. In the basement, among hundreds of case boxes, file 720616 sat still, its cover stained with faint mud. The label read, "Case closed," in cold, slanted print. Somewhere out there, Buffalo Bayou flowed, carrying dust and the glow of refinery lights, things that seemed never to fade, like the questions Vernon Miles knew no one wanted to answer. In August 2006, 33 years after Evelyn Harper's disappearance, the former Beck Refinery site was demolished for a new commercial complex. The old plant had been abandoned for over 2 decades, leaving rusted steel frames and cracked concrete. On a sweltering morning, as excavators dug the final sections of Storage Warehouse 3's foundation, the steel blade hit something hard, ringing with an odd, sharp sound, not like concrete. The operator stopped, signaling his crew. Beneath the oil-stained brown earth, they found an old steel drum, welded shut, rusted and patchy. A faded white BX-14 marking ran along its side. A worker pried it with a crowbar, and as dirt fell away, a pungent smell rose, wet metal and time. They alerted the site supervisor, and within an hour, the area was cordoned off. Houston police arrived with a mobile forensics team. Harris County's lead detective, Alan Reyes, was first on the scene. When the weld was cut, a thin, sour gas escaped. Inside, a flashlight beam revealed the unexpected fragmented human bones mixed with black, dry soil. A woman's watch, its face cracked but hand stuck at 9:40, and a small fabric scrap, nearly disintegrated, embroidered with EA. No one in the team spoke, only the sound of pens scratching and cameras clicking. Everything was sealed and sent to the Houston Medical Examiner's office. In the brightly lit building, Dr. Laura Kim, a veteran examiner, led the analysis. As the bones were cleaned under a microscope, she determined they belonged to an adult woman, aged 25, 30, about 5'4", deceased around the early 1970s. The bones showed a severe impact to the left skull, likely from a blunt object. No bullet marks, no signs of suicide. The watch, cleaned of mud, was a 1971 Timex, common among teachers and office workers. Then, under the oily grime, the fabric scrap had hand-stitched edges, a feminine detail, and the faded but clear EH initials. When those initials were read aloud in the lab, someone recalled a long-ago Harris County case from the papers, Evelyn Harper, missing since June 1972. Reyes had the courthouse archives searched. File 720616E sat untouched, dust coating its case-closed label. Inside were photos of the Ford Pinto, Vernon Miles' handwritten notes, and the line "Possible Involvement, Beck Refinery." Reading it, Reyes felt a chill from the past. News of the discovery spread internally among police. The land's current owner had inherited it from Beck Petroleum after its 1989 dissolution. The abandoned refinery, deemed too polluted, hid a buried drum containing human remains. Forensics sent bone samples to the Texas Department of Public Safety lab in Austin for DNA analysis against missing persons records. While awaiting results, Reyes contacted Evelyn's records agency. Her mother, Margaret Harper, died in 1999, but a cousin in San Antonio agreed to provide a DNA sample for comparison. In March 2007, the results arrived. The DNA matched Evelyn Harper's lineage. The bolded report line, just 4 words, hit like lead. Identity confirmed. Evelyn Harper. Reyes stood in his office, staring at the paper in silence. 33 years later, the woman was found, not returned, but unearthed from a forgotten era's depths. That afternoon, Harris County Sheriff's Office held an urgent meeting. Images of the EH embroidered fabric and the watch flashed on screen, captioned "Recovered" at former Beck Refinery site. Some younger team members hadn't heard of the case, seeing only Evelyn's face in an old black and white photo, her gentle smile, now a witness to an era. Reyes summarized: victim, Evelyn Harper. Missing June 1972. Forensics confirmed death in the same period. Injury, blunt force trauma. Location, former Beck Refinery site. He paused, then said clearly, "This case will be reopened." Vernon Miles' name came up in the meeting. Someone noted he lived in the northern suburbs, retired for nearly a decade. Reyes decided to contact him, as his old handwritten notes aligned strikingly with the new scene. That evening, when Miles answered the phone, his voice was slow but rougher than before. "I knew they'd find her someday. I just didn't think it'd take this long." Reyes asked if he wanted to review the file. Miles replied, "No, I remember it. Don't call it a miracle. It's just justice that got lost and finally found its way back." In the following weeks, the old refinery site was fully sealed off. Forensics returned, excavating around the drum's pit for more clues. They found hand-welded metal marks, typical of 1970s portable welders, and gray workers' fabric scraps deeper in the soil. A broken name tag read only Thack, Beck. All were cataloged as evidence. The drum's oil matched Beck Refinery's 1972 light crude for test engines. The press caught wind. A short article appeared on page 2 of the Houston Chronicle, "Human Remains Found at Former Beck Refinery. Possible Connection to 1972 Missing Woman." The headline stirred memories for those who lived through that decade. An elderly reader called the paper, saying he knew Evelyn and remembered the day she vanished, when everyone assumed she just went somewhere. As night fell, police blue lights flickered around the site, reflecting on Buffalo Bayou's shimmering surface. What lay buried under concrete for over 30 years had resurfaced, carrying the smell of oil and metal, as if the refinery itself had been forced to spit out its secret. In the cold case unit's office, file 720616E was pulled from storage, dusted off and relabeled, reopened. 2007. A case's long-closed door creaked open again, bringing back old questions never answered. About that summer night, the man named Beck, and Houston, where the past sometimes slept under black oil, waiting to be stirred awake. 1 week after the DNA results were confirmed, Evelyn Harper's case was officially transferred to the Houston Police Department's cold case unit. Detective Linda Perez, 32, a specialist in long-standing cases involving industrial and environmental factors, was assigned to take over. In the brightly lit office on Travis Street, Linda opened the 400-page file pulled from storage. The yellowed pages, clipped with faded Polaroid photos, bore typewritten text blurred by time. The file's cover still read, "Case closed, voluntary missing." She flipped through, reading slowly, and paused at a handwritten page, distinct from the typed ones. In the right corner, a signature, V. Miles. Linda underlined a note. Oil samples from the car floor and handkerchief show signs of deliberate exclusion from the official report. Below in smaller script, almost private. Someone erased it. She searched the old system for the author's name, and within an hour, located an address. Vernon Miles, now 72, living in Houston's northern suburbs, the lead detective on Evelyn Harper's case, retired since 1989. That afternoon, Linda drove to a small house on the edge of a pine forest where Miles lived with an old dog. The wooden home was simple, with a porch and walls lined with old photos. When she knocked, Miles opened the door, tall and lean, silver-haired, eyes still sharp, though his voice had slowed. She introduced herself, briefly stating her purpose. Miles gave a faint smile. I knew this day would come. They sat in the small kitchen, sunlight streaming through curtains, casting a golden glow on the stack of old files he pulled from a cabinet. The files were bound with brittle rubber bands. I kept these copies since they ordered the case closed, he said. Otherwise, no one might remember there was ever an Evelyn Harper. Linda opened a file, finding neat handwritten notes, a route diagram, a sketch of the car's location, mud analysis, and notably, a single copy of an oil test slip. You said parts of the report were erased? She asked. Miles nodded. That year, I sent mud and oil samples to the lab. Results showed they matched Beck's crude. 2 days later, the official report came back with that part gone. I asked. They said typing error. I knew it wasn't. He looked out the window at the swaying pines. I requested a warrant for Beck, but it was denied. Then the precinct captain told me to take leave. After that, the file was buried. Linda jotted notes quickly, then asked, Do you have the original analysis? Miles stood, opened an old file cabinet, and pulled out a yellowed manila envelope. Inside was a thin sheet, oil-stained at the corner, with faint typed text, sample residue consistent with light refinery crude, Beck East plant specification. Below a red stamp, review pending. He said, I don't think they ever meant to let me send it. She looked up, their eyes meeting. I won't let it get lost again. That afternoon, leaving Miles' house, Linda felt what every cold case investigator faces, the sense that time is both enemy and sole witness. 33 years had passed. Those involved were dead or forgetful, but physical evidence, oil, fabric, the drum, endured, as if the industrial material itself preserved its guilt. Back at the office, Linda assembled a new team of 4, a petroleum forensics expert, a financial investigator familiar with corporate records, and 2 veteran officers. She pinned an old photo of Beck Refinery to the board, Warehouse 3, where the drum was found, the dirt road where the Ford Pinto was located, and a photo of Thomas Beck, former head engineer. Below it, Linda wrote in red, Core subject. We start from scratch, she said. No relying on old assumptions. Every oil sample, every paper, every signature gets rechecked. Goal. Find who could access Warehouse 3 in 1972, and why no one mentioned it. She assigned tasks, 1 team to retrieve Beck's 1972 transaction records from Industrial Archives, another to review night shift employee lists from May to August. Linda took on contacting living witnesses, former refinery workers. As the meeting ended, the team dispersed, leaving Linda staring at Evelyn Harper's photo pinned to the board. The faded image, taken at a graduation, showed a young teacher with brown hair, a gentle smile, sunlight glinting off her white blouse buttons. Below was a refinery worker's ID with Thomas Beck. Two worlds, two people, linked by a drum, buried for 30 years. Linda whispered, as if to herself, "We'll find him, even if he's just ash now." That night, as the precinct's lights dimmed, the cold case unit's office stayed lit. On the desk, file 720616E lay open. Papers neatly arranged, the smell of old paper mixing with bitter coffee. On the board's corner, Linda wrote, "Houston Cold Case, reopened, January 2007. Below, in bold, sharp strokes, Miles, Beck, Refinery. In the quiet, the hum of the air conditioner blended with the distant city sounds, and outside, the old oil lights of industrial zones flickered, like a memory refusing to fade. The forensic report arrived at the cold case unit 2 weeks after Linda Perez took over. In the brightly lit meeting room, she spread the printed pages on the table, each word dry but heavy with 3 decades of waiting. The first conclusion, boldly underlined, cranial fracture consistent with blunt force trauma. The victim's left skull had a deep crack, indicating direct impact from a solid, flat-surfaced object, likely a metal bar or mechanical tool. No signs of a fall. The second report, from the Petroleum Analysis Lab, confirmed oil from the drum, and the 1972 handkerchief matched Beck Refinery's 1973 light crude for engine testing. Spectroscopic analysis showed a 98% match in benzene and toluene ratios, nearly identical to preserved samples from Texas Technical Archives. "That's no coincidence," Linda said, voice low. The third report, from the FBI's Materials Forensics Division, confirmed the drum's exterior paint was azure blue, Beck specification 1971, an anti-corrosion coating used only in the refinery's eastern test warehouse. Under a microscope, the paint showed 3 layers, zinc base, blue coat, and welded sealant, evidence of manual work, not automated factory process. Someone took a technical drum, sealed it, and buried it under the warehouse floor, the examiner concluded. Linda read slowly, underlining key points, then opened the final small envelope, micro-DNA analysis results. The embroidered fabric from the drum was scanned with new molecular tech, yielding 2 samples, one matching Evelyn Harper's DNA, the other, faint, identified as male. When cross-checked with civilian genetic databases, it showed a partial match to the Beck family, individuals with Y chromosome markers tied to Thomas Beck. Chance of random match, under 0.02%, the report noted. Linda sat still. She looked at the board, Thomas Beck's black and white portrait, stern face, neatly combed hair, expressionless eyes. Below, Miles' handwritten note, last seen talking to victim, 1972. She took a deep breath. No more doubt. This isn't a missing person case. This is a planned and concealed murder. That afternoon, Linda presented the findings to the command board. The screen summary was stark. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Classification, homicide. The room fell silent. An older officer exhaled softly, 30 years to say murder. Linda replied, "But at least now she's a victim in the record, not someone who voluntarily vanished." After the meeting, she returned to her desk, opening her notebook. In the dim light, pages showed cold figures, oil pressure, benzene ratios, drum alloy indices. These inanimate things formed the only possible picture: a woman struck down, hidden in an industrial drum, sealed with a killer's workplace paint. She sent a report to the Harris County DA, proposing to reclassify Evelyn Harper's case as homicide by blunt trauma, with Thomas Beck as the primary suspect and possible accomplices who hid evidence. In the attached file, Linda wrote clearly, skull fracture and oil match Beck Refinery products, drum bears Beck's internal paint. Male DNA aligns with Beck family. No element is coincidental. As she signed the final page, the wall clock neared midnight. The office was quiet. Only the air conditioners hum. Linda stood, looking through the glass door. Outside, Houston's lights glowed, with new refineries risen on old land. Somewhere beneath, the past flowed, thick, black, never dissolving. She whispered, as if to Evelyn, "We've heard your answer." On the desk, the forensic report lay open. Its final lines in bold, summary: skull fracture due to blunt force trauma. Oil residue consistent with Beck Refinery samples. Barrel paint formula matches Beck 1971 industrial coating. Secondary DNA trace consistent with Beck family line. Classification: homicide by blunt trauma. 33 years later, Evelyn Harper's disappearance was officially deemed a murder. The next week, Linda Perez's team compiled all old and new data into the Houston Police Department's digital simulation system. On screen, a 3D satellite map appeared. The route from Deer Park School, the gas station, the Eastern Industrial Zone, and the former Beck Refinery site. Linda stood before the board, laser pointer in hand, voice firm, "We'll reconstruct Evelyn Harper's final journey, every minute, every road." Using Vernon Miles's file, 1972 traffic data, and witness statements, she calculated the route from school to home took about 12 minutes. Evelyn left the school around 9 p.m., stopped at the gas station for 5 minutes, meaning she should have been home before 9:30. But that time frame aligned exactly with Thomas Beck's night shift, supervising the refinery's eastern test zone. On the map, Linda zoomed in on the fence area where the Ford Pinto was found. Markers appeared: car location, tire tracks, handkerchief site, and the drum burial spot. Connecting them, a red diagonal line cut across the refinery's boundary, leading straight to Warehouse 3. The distance from the car's abandonment to the burial site is just over 400 meters, Linda said. If Beck brought her into the refinery, it took minutes, unseen. A technician displayed shift data from Texas Corporate Archives. June 1972, payroll records showed Thomas Beck worked a night shift from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. 3 others were scheduled, but 2 called in sick. For 8 hours, Beck was alone in the test zone. The data silenced the room. Linda looked at the screen, whispering, "We just found the time gap." She ordered a motion model. On screen, a yellow dot. Evelyn moved from school to the gas station, then toward Beck Refinery. A green dot. Beck's vehicle emerged from the refinery gate, heading to the east exit near the gas station. The dots met. The yellow dot slowed, stopped near the fence, then vanished. The green dot returned to the refinery. Minutes later, on the same route, it left the test zone and stopped at Warehouse 3, where the drum was found in 2006. If he transported her in his truck, Linda said, the path matches perfectly. A theory emerged: Evelyn may have gone to Beck Refinery intentionally. Her record showed she volunteered to teach refinery workers' children and wrote for a local newsletter, criticizing Buffalo Bayou's water pollution. Linda found an unsent handwritten letter in the old file. "If they don't stop dumping waste, I'll report to the environmental agency." Addressed to Beck management. She may have brought the letter to meet Beck that night, Linda concluded. She wanted a discussion, but it went wrong. The team built a new hypothesis. Evelyn arrived at the refinery, possibly through the side gate or with Beck's permission. The meeting turned into an argument. Fearing exposure of illegal dumping that could cost his job, Beck lashed out. A single blow, possibly with a pipe or tool, felled Evelyn. In panic, he hid her body in a technical drum, welded it shut, and buried it under the warehouse floor. The oil, paint, and DNA supported this. Linda said she didn't get lost. She sought answers, and it cost her life. That afternoon, she met Vernon Miles to present the simulation results. He studied the 3D map for a long time, then said softly, "Back then I drew this route too, just with pencil. I was right, just at the wrong time." He looked at Evelyn's photo, eyes misting. "Thank you for bringing her back." Linda only nodded. As the screen dimmed, the room filled with the cooling projector's hum. Linda sat, staring at the scattered printouts. The line, Beck Refinery, East Plant, 9:30 p.m., pulsed like an old heart revived. She wrote in the official report, reconstruction summary. Victim's route, recreated through digital mapping. Disappearance time overlaps with Thomas Beck's night shift. Physical evidence indicates close contact near Beck Refinery perimeter. Probable scenario. Victim confronted suspect about illegal discharge, altercation ensued, resulting in fatal injury. As she signed, she glanced through the glass door, where dusk stained Houston's sky red. New refinery lights, replacing Beck's old site, flickered on, reflecting on Buffalo Bayou, like countless swaying embers. Linda thought, perhaps Evelyn Harper never left this place. She lay silent, waiting for someone to find her voice. After completing the route simulation, Linda Perez moved to the next task, tracking any surviving witnesses from Beck Refinery in 1972. Most were retired or deceased, but in the employee list from Texas's archives, one name stood out, Harold Whitman, a night shift guard at Beck's East Gate. Records showed he was born in 1933, now over 70, living in a Huntsville nursing home. Linda confirmed with the facility that he was still lucid. The next day, she drove over an hour and a half to meet him. The nursing home sat in the suburbs, surrounded by old oaks. Linda was led to a common room, where elderly residents watched TV. In a corner, Harold Whitman sat on a wooden chair, thin hands resting on a cane. He looked up as she approached, eyes still sharp, but tinged with weariness. Linda introduced herself, showing her badge. I'm here to ask about Beck Refinery, the night shift in June 1972. Whitman paused, then nodded slightly. I figured someone would come back about that. I just didn't think it'd take this long. They moved to a quieter room. Linda started her recorder, speaking gently. What do you remember about that night? Whitman spoke slowly, voice hoarse with age. I was at the East Gate. It was just me and another guard at the West Warehouse. Around 10, I saw Beck's truck leave. Odd, because he never drove out during his shift. Something long and heavy was under a tarp in the bed. I called out, asked where he was going so late. He just raised a hand, didn't speak. The truck headed down the industrial road and disappeared. Linda asked, did you log it? Yes. I noted the time and plate number, but the next morning, that entry was scratched out. They said, I misremembered. I know I didn't. He paused, exhaling. I told my supervisor, head guard Rollins. He said, Harold, don't stick your nose in Beck's business. If you want to keep working here, forget it. After that, I was moved to day shifts. I quit a year later. Linda asked. Was anyone else asked about this before? Whitman shook his head. No one. When the girl went missing, police came, but Rollins said no one saw anything. I wanted to speak, but they wouldn't let me. At that refinery, Beck had more power than the director. He looked out the window, afternoon sun etching his wrinkled face. I still remember how his truck's headlights swept the fence, glinting off the metal bed. I knew something heavy was in there. The tail sagged. Linda nodded, noting every detail. You're sure it was Beck's truck? You saw him driving? Yes, it was him. I saw the Beck logo on his chest, his low slouch when driving. He wore that gray uniform, always did. His voice trembled but was firm. You know, years later, when the refinery closed, I thought someone might find something. Now they have. Linda opened a 3D map on her tablet, pointing to the East Gate, Dirt Road and Warehouse 3. Does the route he took match this? Whitman stared at the screen, then nodded. Yes, he went that way, back to the warehouse. No one was allowed in or out after 9 p.m. The word sent a chill down Linda's spine. She turned off the recorder, thanking him. As she stood, Whitman called out, Perez. She turned back. His eyes were wet. If you see Detective Miles, tell him he was right. That night, someone left the refinery, and they never came back. Driving back to Houston, Linda replayed the recording. Whitman's hoarse voice lingered, the phrase, "Don't stick your nose," cutting like an old wound reopened. At the precinct, she presented his testimony to the team. An officer whispered, "So they knew from the start." Linda replied, "Yes," and they chose silence. In her report, she wrote witness statement. Harold Whitman, former security guard, observed Thomas Beck leaving plant around 10 p.m., with covered load on truck bed. Entry in logbook erased next day, told by superior, "Do not get involved." Transferred following week, resigned within a year. Assessment. Witness testimony corroborates theory of internal cover-up regarding incident on June 16, 1972. As she signed, night had fallen. Outside, light rain pattered on streets, reflecting lights. Linda looked at Evelyn Harper's photo on the board. In the silence, she whispered, "They hid you for 30 years, but now they have to listen." With Harold Whitman's testimony officially recorded, Linda Perez knew it was time to take the next step toward the last living person named Beck. She ran a civilian records check and found Michael Beck, 54, living in Houston's western suburbs, an electrical engineer for a construction firm. Michael was Thomas Beck's only son, 19 at the time of the disappearance. Records showed his mother died in 1998, his father in 1983, from a stroke. No family member had been investigated. Linda sent a voluntary summons. 2 days later, Michael appeared at the cold case unit, right on time. The man walked in, tall, with graying hair, wearing a gray dress shirt, his eyes carrying the wariness of someone who knew he was about to be questioned about something he didn't want to recall. Linda greeted him, offered a seat, and poured water. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Beck. I just want to talk about your father, Thomas Beck." Michael nodded slightly, his voice low and hoarse. "I knew this was coming sooner or later. Ever since the news broke about the discovery at the old refinery, my phone hasn't stopped ringing." Linda opened the file in front of her, photos of the drum and fabric neatly arranged. "Did you ever visit the Beck Refinery site after your father passed away?" "No," he answered immediately. "The area was sealed off due to contamination. No one was allowed in." "Did your father ever mention anything about the refinery in his final years?" "Never. He avoided it whenever I asked." Linda tilted her head. "Avoided, or forbade you from asking?" Michael hesitated. "Both." She opened the file bag, pulling out a color photo of the drum excavated in 2006. The room's light reflected off the rusted steel and the BX-14 marking. Linda slid the photo toward him. Michael looked down, his hand on the table trembling slightly. After a moment, he spoke softly, almost a whisper. "I know that marking. BX-14 was my father's testing area. When I was a kid, he took me there, said it was the refinery's secret place." Linda asked, "Secret in what way?" Michael went silent, then took a deep breath. "He told me never to tell anyone he buried something on that old land. I thought it was industrial waste. He just said, 'Don't ever talk about that area, Michael. Some things are better left alone.'" Linda jotted notes quickly, keeping her voice calm. "Did you notice any changes in your father after Evelyn Harper's disappearance?" Michael looked up, his gaze distant. "He became quieter, often sat alone on the porch. I saw him wake up at night, hands shaking. I asked what was wrong. He said it was just dreams of metal clanging. As I got older, I knew something was off, but no one in the house dared mention it. He was strict, and I was afraid of him." Linda placed Evelyn Harper's photo on the table, an old image, soft light, a young woman with a gentle smile. "Do you recognize her?" Michael glanced briefly, then shook his head. "No. But I remember my mom saying a teacher at the school of the supervisor's daughter went missing. That night, my father came home late, clothes stained with oil. Mom asked, he said. A pipe leaked and he had to fix it. I didn't think much of it then. Now," he trailed off, slumping back in his chair. The room fell quiet. Linda said softly, "Mr. Beck, I know this is hard, but the truth can help close this." Michael pursed his lips, twisting the water glass. You think my father killed her? I think he was directly involved, and I think you know more than you want to admit." For a long moment, he didn't respond, staring at the drum photo as if hypnotized. Finally, he said, "If he did it, maybe I'm guilty too, for staying silent." Linda didn't reply. She closed the file and handed him the statement confirmation sheet. As he signed, his hand shook. Before leaving, he paused at the door, turning back. "Perez, there's something you should know. I still have a small wooden box my father left. He said never to open it, that it belonged to the past. I never dared touch it. If you want, I can hand it over." 3 hours later, Linda stood in Michael's small attic, amid the smell of old wood and machine oil. He brought out a heavy square box, its lock rusted. Inside was a thick notebook with Thomas Beck's scrawled handwriting, shift logs, supply records, and a carefully folded page, a diagram of the Eastern Test Warehouse, marked with an X at the exact spot where the drum was found. Linda sealed everything in an evidence bag. "Thank you, Mr. Beck. This is critical." He nodded slightly, eyes dropping to the floor. "Do you believe guilt can be inherited?" Linda answered softly. "No, but silence can." As she drove away, afternoon sun streamed through the windshield, glinting off Thomas Beck's photo taped to the file on the passenger seat. Below was Michael Beck's trembling signature, noting his statement, "My father told me never to talk about the old land." In the car, only the steady hum of the engine and the sense that the past had just stirred awake, revealing the final piece of a secret buried for over 30 years. 2 days after receiving Thomas Beck's notebook, Linda Perez sent it to the handwriting and chemical ink analysis lab. Results confirmed the notebook was written by Thomas Beck around mid-1972. The final page had a hastily scrawled line, "Must end. No one must know." It was the strongest evidence Linda had, but still not enough to close the case. She needed the words of the living, Michael Beck. On the afternoon of September 12th, Michael voluntarily came to the precinct. The small interrogation room, lit by cold white light, held only Linda, a note-taking investigator, an appointed public defender, and a recorder on the table. Linda began calmly. "Mr. Beck, we'll talk again about the night of June 16, 1972. You have the right to remain silent, but if you choose, now's the time to speak." Michael looked around, exhaustion clear. 6 hours later, his answers became a cohesive confession. At first, he repeated, "I didn't know anything. I was just the son back then." But when Linda placed his father's notebook on the table, open to "Must end," something in him broke. His voice dropped, trembling. "You want the whole story?" Linda replied. "I want the truth." He closed his eyes, hands clasped, and began, slow and hoarse. "That night, I went to the refinery to drop off papers for my dad. I was 19, a summer intern at the machine shop. When I got there, the test area's lights were on. The warehouse door was ajar, and I heard arguing. A woman's voice, unfamiliar, sharp, talking about my dad dumping waste in the river, threatening to report it. My dad shouted, "You don't understand. This is my job." Then a loud thud, metal falling, and silence. He paused, staring at the table. I ran in and saw her lying on her side, head bleeding. My dad stood there, holding a metal bar. He was pale, muttering. "I didn't mean to," she slipped. I said we had to call the police, but he grabbed my arm, hard. "No, we can't. They'll shut the refinery. We'll lose everything." I didn't dare argue, Michael continued, voice choking. "He told me to get a drum from the warehouse, the kind used for oil test. He laid a tarp, put her in. I still remember the oil smell, sickening. He told me to hold the light while he welded the lid shut. I asked why. He said, 'If we bury it here, no one will find it.' We used a truck to move the drum to the new concrete foundation and buried it. When done, he turned off the light, looked at me and said, 'Never mention tonight, Michael. Never.'" The room was silent, only the scribbling of the clerk's pen. Linda asked, "Are you certain the victim was Evelyn Harper?" Michael nodded, lips tight. I didn't know her name, but the next morning, when the news mentioned a missing teacher, I knew. He wiped his forehead, eyes red. I've carried the guilt my whole life for not speaking. My mom knew too, but pretended not to. She was afraid of losing everything. Linda activated the recorder, voice steady. Are you willing to confirm your father welded the drum and buried the body under the Beck Refinery warehouse floor? Michael answered clearly. Yes. I saw it. I helped push it into the pit. The lawyer nodded, confirming consent for the recorded statement. Linda continued, Did your father say anything before leaving the warehouse? He looked back at me and said, We did what was necessary. One life can't ruin the whole operation. Then he drove home. I stayed, cleaning the oil and blood with solvent. Tears rolled down Michael's face, his voice barely audible. For 30 years, every night, I hear the welding, the metal clanging. I thought I could forget, but I couldn't. When they dug up the drum, I knew time was up. Linda stopped writing, looking at him. Do you have anything to say to Evelyn Harper's family? He nodded, choking. If they can hear, I just want to say I'm sorry. I wasn't brave enough to save her or speak sooner. I let my father live and die in silence, and I was trapped in that silence too. The interrogation ended near midnight. The full statement was recorded, filmed, witnessed by the lawyer and a prosecutor. Michael Beck signed the transcript, his handwriting shaky, ink smudged. As Linda turned off the recorder, she said softly, Thank you for speaking. Sometimes, truth arriving late is still truth. He replied faintly, No, Perez. Truth arriving late always brings a body. As he was let out, Linda sat alone. On the table, Thomas Beck's notebook lay open to No One Must Know, facing the new recording, where the sun broke that rule. Outside, Houston was unusually quiet. She knew tomorrow the city would wake to news that its longest-running missing person case had an answer, and 30 years of silence was buried again, this time, in the light. The next morning, Linda Perez returned to the precinct as fog lingered. She'd barely slept, rereading Michael Beck's confession, cross-checking every detail with the old file. Everything matched eerily, the timing, location, even the truck Harold Whitman mentioned. But she needed what a court would accept, physical evidence. If the confession was the spark, Beck Refinery's old records were the fuel. Linda called the industrial records team. They spent 3 days combing Texas's corporate archives, where Beck Petroleum's pre-dissolution invoices were stored. Among thousands of rotting boxes, they found a June 1972 procurement log. The cover read faintly, Procurement Records, Maintenance Division. On page 47, Linda saw a small handwritten entry, June 14, 1972. Purchased 12 steel barrels, type BX-14, for East Plant testing. Below, a signature, T. Beck. She held the paper with gloved hands, staring, then gave a faint smile, not from joy, but because the truth finally had a tangible form. The signature was sent to forensic analysis. Results confirmed, the pen stroke slant and pressure matched the notebook Michael provided. Meanwhile, Beck's former accountant, Janet Rowe, now over 80, was found in Austin. When Linda showed her the invoice copy, she nodded slightly. I remember, it was a special order, Mr. Beck said not to log it digitally. I thought it was just test equipment. Her confirmation sealed the final piece of the evidence chain. Linda gathered the team, presenting the compiled report, invoice for BX-14 barrels, dated June 14, 1972. Thomas Beck's signature verified. Crime scene evidence shows a BX-14 drum used to conceal the body. Witness Harold Whitman's testimony confirms Beck's truck left the refinery on June 16. Michael Beck's confession aligns with all data. Harris County DA Jeffrey Collier, after hearing it, said one sentence, "We have everything." Time to close it. On September 12, 2007, Linda and 2 officers were ordered to arrest Michael Beck at his suburban West Houston home. The morning was quiet, sunlight filtering through oaks, dew still on the lawn. As the police car stopped, Michael stood on the porch, as if waiting. He wore a gray sweater, face haggard but calm. Linda stepped out, holding the warrant. "Michael Beck," she said slowly. "You're under arrest for accessory to homicide in the 1972 murder of Evelyn Harper." He nodded, eyes down. "I know. I've been waiting for this day." The handcuffs clicked gently. No resistance. As they led him to the car, wind scattered dry leaves across the yard. Neighbors watched, whispering half-believed theories. A woman asked softly, "What did he do?" An officer replied, "Something from a long time ago." At the precinct, Michael was taken to a holding cell. Linda signed the arrest confirmation and sent the full file to the DA. In her report to superiors, she wrote, September 12, 2007. Suspect Michael Beck arrested for accessory involvement in homicide case #7200616E. Evidence chain confirmed through forensic documents and confession. Investigation considered concluded pending court proceedings. That afternoon, as the news broke, Houston media ran headlines. Arrest made in 1972, Evelyn Harper murder. Local TV aired footage of the police car leaving Beck's home, blue and red lights reflecting on the quiet street. City residents, many who'd forgotten Evelyn's name, now mentioned it over coffee. 35 years, didn't think anyone would answer for it. Linda stayed off the news. She remained in the office, standing before the case board. Evelyn Harper's photo remained centered, beside a new red note. Case closed. September 2007. Below she added by hand, "Justice, delayed but found." That evening she visited Vernon Miles. He opened the door, saw her, and understood without asking. "They got him?" "Yes," his son confessed. Miles nodded, pouring 2 cups of tea. "Good. Sometimes, justice just needs one person to tell the truth, even late." He looked out at the yard, where the last daylight faded, and added, "I've lived long enough to know truth doesn't die, it's just buried under layers of earth." Linda stayed silent. She recalled Michael Beck's words in the interrogation room. "Truth arriving late always brings a body." Now, with the cuffs locked and the file closed, she knew each person in this story carried their own weight. But at least Evelyn Harper was no longer labeled voluntary missing. As Linda left Miles's house, a light rain fell over Houston. The faint oil smell from old roads lingered, a reminder that this city was built on industry and secrets. In the car, she turned on the radio. A brief news report played, "Houston police have arrested Michael Beck, 54, charged as an accessory in a 1972 murder. This is the coldest case solved in Texas history." She switched off the radio, leaned back, and closed her eyes. Outside, raindrops tapped the windshield like a clock, counting down for souls awaiting rest. 35 years, 5 rounds of questioning, hundreds of file pages, all condensed into one quiet moment. As the dashboard clock ticked to 11 p.m., Linda wrote in her notebook, "Arrest executed. 35-year cycle closed. Truth never sleeps." Michael Beck's trial began on the morning of March 5, 2008, at the Harris County Courthouse in Houston. The courtroom was packed with reporters and residents, many from 1970s Deer Park, there to witness the end of a story suspended for 35 years. Michael appeared in a gray prison uniform, walking slowly, his hair grayer than at his arrest. He didn't shy from cameras, but his eyes stayed down, silent, as if accepting what was coming. DA Jeffrey Collier presented a concise indictment. Defendant Michael Beck, as an accessory, aided his father, Thomas Beck, in concealing the body and covering up the murder of teacher Evelyn Harper in June 1972. This act prolonged the crime for over 3 decades, obstructing justice and denying the victim's family the truth. He submitted evidence, the June 14, 1972, barrel invoice, Harold Whitman's testimony, and Thomas Beck's original notebook. Images of the rusted steel drum and embroidered fabric appeared on the large screen, their final appearance in a legal setting. No one spoke. The only sounds were flipping papers and pens tapping lightly on wooden tables. The defense attorney did not deny Michael's involvement, but pleaded for leniency, arguing that the defendant was only 19 at the time, acting under his father's control and fear. Michael sat still, hands clasped, not looking up as the lawyer mentioned his youth. When given the chance to speak, he stood, voice low and trembling. "I have no excuse to offer. I stayed silent too long. Every day, I thought of that woman, thought if I'd stopped my father, things would have been different. I don't ask for forgiveness, only that justice be recognized for her." After 3 hours of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict: Michael Beck, guilty of concealing a body and obstructing an investigation, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The ruling rang out firmly, silencing the courtroom. Some shed tears, whether from pity or relief unclear. Michael only nodded, showing no reaction, as if the sentence was one he'd imposed on himself years ago. That afternoon, the cold case unit issued its final 72-page investigation report, summarizing the entire process. The first page bore bold text: Case 720616E, Evelyn Harper Homicide Investigation, closed. Under offender identification, it read primary perpetrator, Thomas Beck, accessory, Michael Beck. In a final handwritten note, Linda Perez added, "Case determined to stem from a motive to conceal illegal waste dumping, resulting in a fatal outcome. Victim Evelyn Harper died from blunt force trauma to the skull." When reading the completed report, Vernon Miles, now frail, received a hand-delivered copy. He called Linda, voice choked but warm. "You did what we couldn't. Thank you for bringing her back to her place." Linda replied softly, "No one should be forgotten, sir." Later that year, the Evelyn Harper case file was displayed at the Houston Cold Case exhibit, showcasing resolved, long-standing cases. In a glass case, next to Evelyn's photo, was the brittle, embroidered fabric, a witness to time. Below, a small brass plaque read, "Evelyn Harper missing June 1972. Found 2006. Justice concluded, 2007. Outside the courthouse, as Michael was transferred to Huntsville Prison, Houston saw light rain. Linda stood under an awning, watching the prison van leave. She felt no triumph, only a quiet calm like the rain tapping evenly on the tin roof. 35 years, countless deaths and aging lives, left only belated justice. In the cold case unit office, Linda took down the investigation board, storing all photos and maps in a box. Before sealing it, she placed Vernon Miles's 1973 note on top. His handwritten words, "Someone wiped the truth clean." Below she added in red ink, "But truth cannot vanish." As she turned off the light, she looked through the window, seeing the city's distant lights reflected on Buffalo Bayou, where Evelyn Harper's traces once flowed, now just silent ripples. The case was closed, the 35-year cycle complete. But in the thin rain, Linda knew Evelyn's voice lingered in the breeze, soft, faint, like a thank you to those who ensured she wasn't forgotten again. 2 weeks after the trial, Texas major newspapers ran front-page headlines, "Houston's longest cold case solved." Below was Evelyn Harper's black-and-white photo, her gentle smile intact, printed between two images, one of Thomas Beck as an engineer and one of his son on sentencing day. The Houston Chronicle wrote, 35 years after a teacher was buried with industrial secrets, she's been found. Justice came late, but it came. The story spread nationally, featured on investigative TV shows. It was called The Final Symphony of Silence, a prime example that no crime can stay hidden forever. In the following days, the cold case unit's phones rang constantly. People from across the region called about old missing persons cases, loved ones never found. Letters, thank yous, and old photos piled up on Linda Perez's desk. Harris County Sheriff's Office announced the reopening of 17 unsolved missing persons cases from the 1970s, 1980s, all tied to industrial areas or Buffalo Bayou's banks. For the first time in years, Houston launched a comprehensive review of cold case files, dusty papers resting silently in the basement's metal cabinets. A press conference was held on June 20th, 2008, marking 1 year since the Evelyn Harper case was reopened. The room was packed with reporters. Linda Perez stepped to the podium, face serious, but eyes calm. She spoke slowly, each word clear. No case is truly cold. Only investigations get paused. The line echoed in silence, later quoted in every paper. She outlined plans to revisit files, sharing the Harper case experience. Science may change, witnesses may fade, but files always wait for someone to find them. When asked if she regretted stirring painful memories, Linda replied, "Sometimes pain is the only thing alive enough to lead us to the truth." After the conference, Linda returned to the office. On her desk, a framed photo showed the investigation team before the Harper case board, with red text, "Case closed. Truth found. June 2007. Below, she'd handwritten, "In memory of Evelyn Harper, 1946, 1972. Houston seemed to awaken with memories of a dust-covered era. Schools held memorials for unresolved violence victims. Local radio replayed a 1973 interview with Margaret Harper, her mother's voice breaking in the old recording. "I just want to know where my daughter is." After nearly 4 decades, that question had an answer. At Deer Park Elementary, where Evelyn taught, students and teachers built a small memorial plaque in the school's back garden. It read simply, "For Miss Harper, who taught us that truth matters." Students still place flowers every June, when summer returns, as if to remind that some lessons never age. The press sought Vernon Miles. They photographed him on his porch, coffee cup beside him, sunlight on his aged face. He said one short sentence, "Justice doesn't die. It just needs someone patient enough." The line became the subtitle for KHOL 11's special report, "The Detective Who Never Stopped Looking." Watching it in her office, Linda gave a faint smile. Soon after, the cold case unit received expanded funding. A new task force, named Harper Task Force, was formed to review pre-1980 cases. Linda was appointed lead advisor. Each morning, passing the file cabinet, she paused at the third drawer, where Evelyn Harper's file rested. The red label stood clear, "Case closed. Truth found. June 2007. She always touched the label's edge before moving on, a silent ritual to remind her why she started this work. Occasionally, she received handwritten letters from strangers. Some simply said, "Thank you for not giving up." Others, retired Beck Refinery workers, shared what they knew about other accidents. All were filed, opening new investigation paths. But for Linda, every case after carried Evelyn Harper's shadow, the forgotten woman who forced a system to rethink time and justice. One late-year evening, Linda returned to the old site, now a commercial complex. Where Warehouse 3 once stood was a supermarket parking lot. She stood silently, watching neon lights, hearing music and laughter. Beneath that smooth concrete was once a temporary grave. Linda knelt, placing white flowers on the curb's edge, whispering, "Now you can rest." Back in her car, she opened her notebook and wrote the final entry for the Harper case. Justice doesn't come with gunfire or verdicts, but with the persistence of memory. Evelyn Harper was found, and with her, this city found its conscience again. In June 2008, Harris County Sheriff's Office held a ceremony recognizing the cold case unit's achievements. On stage, Linda received a commendation plaque, but when invited to speak, she said simply, "We didn't solve this case by luck, but by believing every truth knows how to return." Applause filled the auditorium. That night, Linda returned late. She opened the office file cabinet, pulling out case 720616E. The cover was worn, edges yellowed, but the red text glowed under the desk lamp. "Case closed. Truth found. June 2007. She returned the file to its drawer, closing it gently. The click was dry but firm, like a full stop to 35 years of silence. Then she turned off the light and stepped into the empty hallway. Outside, Houston buzzed, lit up, but in that just-closed room, the truth had finally found a place to rest. The story of Evelyn Harper's case, a young teacher murdered and buried in a steel drum for 35 years, is not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of part of America's reality, where justice can be delayed, yet persistent people pull it back. In this case, the scariest part wasn't Thomas Beck's crime, but the decades-long silence, from a fearful son, to bribed superiors, to a system that closed files for insufficient evidence. The truth was buried with a woman, and it took over 30 years and a new generation of investigators, like Linda Perez, to unearth it. In today's America, where we trust in law, technology, and transparency, this story remains a vital reminder: never assume silence is safe. Many wrongs, from school violence to workplace harassment to corporate corruption, persist because people fear speaking, fear touching back. But like Linda, one person daring to reopen a file, to ask what was erased from the report, can change history's outcome. Evelyn Harper's lesson is: justice needs memory and courage, not power. In today's fast, noisy American life, we must remember that truth doesn't vanish. It sleeps, waiting for someone brave enough to wake it. And when we do what's right, even late, we write the legacy of those once forgotten. Thank you for following the 35-year journey of justice in the Evelyn Harper case. A testament that truth, though buried, will be found. Please subscribe to our channel to explore more mysterious crime stories, where the past still waits to be heard in our next video.